joined in the studio now by news analyst Dorcas Gwata and by Vava Tampa, who is a human rights activist. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. Dorcas, a year of anguish and still no sign of them. The army recapturing many towns in the northeast, but no clues as to what's become of the girls, and their families and supporters, of course, holding on tenaciously to what seems to be a forlorn hope.
Charles, this is a very distressing situation. There are 2 points for me that are really, really significant. 200 girls go missing in Nigeria, and we don't have the continental outrage. 12 people are murdered in Paris. African leaders fly to Paris to demonstrate against those killings, which are just as outrageous and validated. But there isn't any outrage within Africa that these girls have gone missing. They went missing on Jonathan's clock and watch. And in that regard, he's accountable in office and out of office, and that needs to be taken up. The other issue is that these girls have been away for so long. Now, we know what the risk factors are in terms of trafficking, and when girls go away, there's sexual exploitation. It's very likely that they're being used in war, in all sorts of methods. There's trauma that accompanies this. There's trauma with the parents who are waiting, and there's trauma with the kids who are, we don't know what state they will be. We are not seeing the outrage, absolute outrage, that we see in other different factors. We have the Congo, where so many things have been going on, but we have to look internally within our own continent to ask ourselves why we are not outraged by this continental issue.
No, absolutely. I was on a program in Britain this morning talking about the Chibok girls, and I was asked whether or not there should be more international reaction. And I said to them that the primary responsibility for those girls is to the Nigerian government.
Absolutely, absolutely, and definitely I do accept what Dorcas has said. Jonathan, President Goodluck Jonathan, the former Nigerian president, certainly should be held accountable. He did not do enough, and possibly one of the reasons he lost the last election was because he did not react as fast as he should have reacted again, in reaction to the girls going missing. But I mean, in terms of outrage, there has been an outrage in Africa. I mean, this is for the first time we have seen actually the African Union, for some reason, coming together and putting together a team, an army to go after Boko Haram. This has never happened before. We've had a similar situation in places like Uganda, where, the LRA, the Low Resistance Army, has been going after girls and boys and so forth for over 20 years. Never before. The AU has came together to sort of react the way they have reacted. So there is a sense of urgency because people do realize simply how grave and how serious these threats are. And these threats are not simply in Nigeria. They do extend and expand all the way to Kenya. We've seen what happened a couple of weeks ago, and you have Somalia right next door. And when you have places of chaotic places like Congo, right in the heart of Africa, I mean, so people do understand and realize we have to deal with this situation.
Okay, well, if you'll stay with us, I think we've got our special correspondent back now in Abuja, Sarah Firth, who's live from the Nigerian capital. Sarah, just describe for us the mood in Nigeria 1 year on.
Well, Charles, it's a very sombre mood here tonight in Abuja, and behind me you've got a candlelit vigil taking place, people lighting candles, and they're actually talking through the 219 names of those Chibok girls who were kidnapped 1 year ago today. It's a critical anniversary, a very sad anniversary. We've been speaking to some of the founders of the group here, some of the people who've been turning out on a daily basis, really trying to keep the pressure on the government and also keep the story in the international spotlight. Now, when the Chibok girls were kidnapped, you saw the Bring Back Our Girls campaign and that hashtag going global, really, and it gained huge international attention. But this is a daily thing. Every time we're here in Abuja, you see people gathered at this spot, again, trying to keep up the pressure. And so today, really marking the anniversary, and also we were hearing earlier from the founders of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. They were saying that when they started, they were very optimistic that they'd get, with that international backing, some decisions made, some action taken, and hopefully some results, and a year on and still very little information has actually come to the families and friends of those girls. And so what they're saying today is they're in this for the long haul. They're not going to stop applying that pressure, and that is why today is so critical, to remember these girls and to keep the pressure up to try and get some crucial answers.
And of course, Sarah, you've been talking to, as you mentioned there, those campaigners behind you. Is there any evidence at all that there might be the slightest scintilla, the minutest glimmer of light in their despair?
Well, I think what's absolutely incredible when you speak to the people who are here on a daily basis, as we said, the cameras come in for the anniversary, but these people are here every single day to try and keep the pressure up to get those girls returned home. And what's really amazing about it is the sheer determination of the people who are gathered here to keep applying that pressure, to keep pushing for action. And it's really incredible to see. In the space of a year, you've had a lot of promises made, you've had a lot of statements being made about what will be delivered, and actually very few results. You've had a major counterinsurgency operation taking place in the northeast of the country, and little snippets of details coming out here and there, but really it's been pretty heartbreaking actually for the families and friends, and compounded by the fact that there's been so little information coming out. So, you know, it's very difficult. It's a year on, there's still no information. You've had this big operation taking place in the northeast of the country, the military claiming to have taken back most of the territory that Boko Haram held up until that point, and yet very little information about the Chibok girls' whereabouts and well-being. So it's difficult to stay hopeful, but I think the feeling here amongst the group and the Bring Back Our Girls campaigners is one of determination, certainly.
Sarah Firth, our special correspondent, live there from Abuja. And still with us, our two guests, the news analyst Dorcas Gwata and Vava Tampa, who's a human rights activist. Dorcas, you were talking there and correctly so, about the strident criticism of the outgoing government of President Jonathan and the rather ineffectual and apathetic way they handled these abductions. Is there now more hope with the election of a new president who's a former army general?
Buhari's got his plate full. He's got a lot of priorities. He is a northerner. These girls were from the north. If Jonathan failed to do anything, he failed to demonstrate simple care. If his daughter had gone missing, he would never have rested. We know that. He failed to. There are polarized issues here. He's a southerner, and these girls are from the north, and he failed to demonstrate any kind of care. There is some hope, because we know that the Nigerian army is gaining some momentum with Boko Haram. They may be able to rescue these girls. They may not be able to rescue them, but the state in which they will be, if they are rescued, is going to be very much of trauma. What is very important, though, Charles, which we haven't followed through, and I work very much at grassroots level, we've got young girls who've escaped from this. And a lot of them have gone into schools, some have gone into America. What we haven't been able to do is follow the narrative of these and the experiences of these young girls. We haven't been able to hear them. This is what captures momentum. You hear about somebody's experience, then you want the same for somebody else who's captured. So there are many strands of this story which we've been inadequate in delivering them.
Very briefly, Vava, what do you think has become of those girls?
Well, I'll tell you what, first thing is I refuse to subscribe to the view that somehow because Jonathan is a southerner, he refused to sort of express sympathy toward those girls who are northerners. I think he was sort of somehow blinded by his advisors and other ministers. He was not well guided, he was not well advised, and he didn't make the right decision at the time. However, we ought to hold him accountable. Now, what ought to be done? Well, I think Buhari, Mohammed, the new president, won't have to react as fast as he can possibly react. He has to do everything. If he fails to react, if he fails to find some of these girls, if not all of them, he will also be held accountable. Now, we need to take into account it's been 1 year, and within that year, a lot could happen. I mean, Nigeria has a lot of neighbors, and some of those neighbors are amazingly chaotic. So he has to use all of his might and use all the allies that Nigeria has in the region and outside the regions to bring those girls back.
Okay. Vava Tampa and Dorcas Gwata for the moment. Thank you very much.